Thank you for sticking with us. We're delighted to have a group of private and public sector advisors to provide some advice about the public and private sector resources that are available to help startups and small businesses go global. And so just wanted to recognize everyone on the panel first. You've already met Bianca, who's head of customer care for Intuit QuickBooks Australia. Also joined by Topaz Conway, commercialization advisor for the Entrepreneurs Program of the Australian government. Jennifer Kay, who's general manager for the Entrepreneurs Program. Brian McDonald, Director of Mid-Market and Small Business from PayPal Australia. And many of you probably know Alex Scandura, who's the CEO of Stone & Chalk. So like the earlier panel, the goal is to have more of a conversation than a series of presentations. And so it's just hoping to ask each of you to speak a little bit to an initial question and then have a conversation from there. Bianca, I wanted to start with you. Could you highlight one or two pieces of advice that a lean startup could take to increase its chances of succeeding globally?
Sure. So as Jake alluded to, I head up customer care at Intuit QuickBooks Australia, and prior to that was heading up the product function before switching roles. So for me, one of the things that I see in terms of the challenges that small businesses face, in particular, is it's tough to navigate. One, you've got to be bold to go out there and firstly, take a lot of guts to go and, launch a small business. I have a little side hustle myself, so I feel your pain because it's time consuming, it's challenging, and you don't always know what you're doing. Whether it be to what technology tools you need to be leveraging, whether it be, Graham and the team the panel earlier gave some great examples about how do you overcome some of these different challenges as a small business if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing it on your own. So for me, what I like to want to help small businesses do is to look at what are the technology solutions that they can enable to help them grow and scale globally. And obviously with QuickBooks Online, that's a global accounting software solution, and we find that a lot of small businesses really struggle with understanding the financial side to their business. You start out business because you're passionate about what it is you do. You want to do. You have a dream about launching a product or a service, or you're frustrated with something and you want to do it better than the next person. So in that case, you don't really care about the financial side to your business. So it's leveraging with global cloud-based solutions that enable you to grow and scale globally, whether it be partnering with great payments providers such as PayPal to help you take those payments internationally, converting those transactions and those foreign currency transactions into your local currency. There's so much that a small business needs to face. And for me, as I was saying, it takes a bold, courageous step to get out there and have that dream to want to do something different. But really, if you leverage technology, be global and try to be global from day one and be cloud-based from day one. I see so many businesses that we visit, and as my team interact with small businesses and accountants and bookkeepers every day, that are still paper-based. And for me, I find that mind-boggling because in today's environment, looking at how do you leverage mobile to run your business. There are so many great mobile capabilities that allow you to run your business from your pocket. And these days, whether you're running your business from a car, whether you're running your business from a great environment like Stone & Chalk, you need that mobility and that capability to make sure that you can run your business whether you're in Sydney, New York, Singapore, London, wherever your business needs to grow. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I see that small businesses face today is, and Graham alluded to it earlier, the plethora of technology solutions out there, but picking those first few tech solutions that are really going to help you grow and scale as your business grows.
Thank you, Bianca. So one of the things that we talk about is leveraging the suite of services that's necessary to run your business on a global basis and access global customers. And one of those components is certainly payments. And so wanted to turn to Brian to kind of build off of what Bianca said. Could you talk a little bit about, from the payments perspective, how PayPal and other technologies enable access to global markets?
Yeah, sure. G'day, everyone. Ryan McDonald here. So I look after mid-market and small business, and my true passion is Australian small business. I'm lucky enough to get to talk to thousands of Australian small businesses every single year. And when they ask me, how do I be successful? How do I go overseas? The one piece of advice I give is to look for partners in enabling that. So partners like Intuit and partners like PayPal. So in our business, we truly are a global platform. We have pre-integrated into over 1,900 platforms globally. That means that if you are entering onto that platform for your business in some way, PayPal is available. But if I talk about the nature of our business, it really is a two-sided financial network. We have 210 million consumers actively using us in markets all around the world, 200 markets. and 12 million merchants. If I bring that down to Australia, 7 million consumers and hundreds of thousands of merchants. So what does that actually mean if you're talking about cross-border trade? It means that when you see the PayPal mark, there's an instant trust affiliation given to the transaction. So you're a Chinese buyer buying from Sass & Bide, I'm sure they do, and you see the PayPal symbol, you see the PayPal logo, there's immediate trust imported into that. So let's elaborate a little bit about China. So absolutely massive market. 524 million active internet users, 4 million active internet users added every single month in the Chinese market. And last year in 2016, there were 423 million e-commerce shoppers. So think about that number, 423 million e-commerce shoppers. So that's 17.6 times the size of the Australian population. Now, when I talk to the businesses that we deal with every single year, I say, guys, you've got to think global straight away. That's it. And platforms like Shopify, like Intuit, like PayPal help you go global straight away. You're not going to have the scale or capability to do everything and build everything for yourself, so leverage what is a truly equalizing force in the economy, i.e. software and the availability of the internet. Absolutely massive opportunities out there for businesses, and yeah.
I thought I would stay with the private sector then and maybe turn to Alex next and ask, I mean, we're here at Stone & Chalk, and so what role can a startup hub like Stone & Chalk play in equipping entrepreneurs with the tools that they need to succeed globally?
Yeah, good question. And I guess it's important to keep in mind there's probably two key segments to this conversation. One are more like the SMEs that are the consumers of that kind of technology, and startups and bigger startups like a PayPal or a QuickBooks are the creators of that technology that SMEs and others are looking to consume. So what Stone & Chalk does is really work with startups that are looking to create innovation and the platforms of tomorrow. And that's the context of answering that question. So the kind of role that we play is quite varied and thankfully rich. So the way Stone & Chalk works is we've got about 24 corporate partners that work closely with us, and their names are on the board on your way in or out. And they play a vital role because there's one thing that startups need more than anything else, any early stage business, and that's customers. And large organisations have lots of problems to solve or lots of great opportunities to go after. So they play a great role in being potential customers for those early stage ventures. So in terms of the global context, what we try and do is encourage organisations, founders in particular, to really focus on in the initial stages of their life stage of their business around the local market. It's not one size fits all either. So you've really got to start with the end in mind, and the end in mind should really be to be a global business, right? But you can't be global from day one, right? PayPal didn't have, hundreds of millions of users the second day they launched, right? They had to get there. And where did they start? Well, they started in their local market. And one of the trickiest conversations and points of decision for any business is timing. Right? Timing is just so important. And there's no magic bullet, there's no secret formula that you can say, once you get to this stage, go to the next market and then go to the next market and then you're now a global enterprise. And that's the hardest conversation to have. Brian's just talked about China. Who's been to China? Just show of hands. Right, so maybe about 20% of the room. Right, so I've been to China only twice, and the two times I've been there, I've gone from, hey, it's all about China, we've got to go and do business in China, to holy moly, there is no way we're doing business in China, right? Now, that's just us to do with what we do, right? But if you think about it, if you're a very early stage organisation and you're, David and Goliath, but there's 50 Goliaths, right? You're going to be sitting there trembling in terms of, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? So it's really important to be thinking about a couple of things. One, have you actually made it in your home market? Is the product or solution you're creating relevant to the home market that you're in? And if not, why are you creating it in that market in the first place, right? And if you're looking to go internationally, which you should be, certainly in the technology space, then if you haven't made it in your home market, the first question any potential customer or any potential investor is going to ask is why not? what is wrong with your product as to why you're coming to my market to try and push it, given you've failed or haven't been successful yet in your home market, right? So that's really, really important. And the second thing is also to talk about your capital and your resource availability and your potential runway and balance sheet, right? So you can imagine to enter a whole new market is enormous cost and risk and time in terms of understanding regulation, understanding culture, understanding the nature of the market itself and the potential users for your product or solution. And that takes a long time to get right. And one thing that we've learned is exceptionally the case in Asia is a relationship market. You've got to build a relationship first to earn the right and the trust before they'll do business with you. And that takes time, right? So as any type of enterprise, whether it's SME or whether it's technology based, as far as high growth goes, timing plays a massive, massive role. And in a lot of cases, we've actually encouraged founders to focus more on growing critical mass in their home market before taking a leap forward to the next market. And that's never to say that they're not going global. It's about setting them up for success so that when they do go global, that success rate is much higher than would otherwise have been.
Thanks, Alex. So I think the Entrepreneurs Program has gotten more shout-outs than anyone here today. But I wonder, Jennifer, maybe if you could start by putting it in a little bit of context and giving a broader overview about the services that the Entrepreneurs Program provides and what it is.
Sure. So I've got speaking notes because I've found when you're talking about government policy, it's really better to be precise about your form of words, because I have had an incident where I wasn't and a whole lot of people thought they were eligible for something that they had not. So the Entrepreneurs Program is a suite of services that's really aimed at helping businesses grow. So there are 4 different elements. I'll let Topaz probably talk about accelerating commercialisation because I'm sure she's an expert. But basically we've got a network of 130 advisors and facilitators around Australia that work with small and medium businesses to essentially help them solve problems. So I look after the business management element, which is really about helping Australian businesses improve their management capability. I think the biggest challenge in government policy, and the thing I've been reflecting on listening to people talk today, is that we have Australian businesses across a really wide spectrum of sophistication. So echoing what Bianca was saying, we had an $80 million business that was still running their finances off a spreadsheet living on someone's desktop. So we're dealing with businesses like that right up to the ones that are kind of really born digital and born global. Innovation Connections, which we got a little bit of a shout out from the minister, is really about helping businesses connect with publicly funded research organisations to help them solve problems. We don't have a great track record in Australia of commercialising research, so this is one of the ways we help them do that. Incubator support's one of our newer elements, so that's kind of aimed at incubators and accelerators and better, particularly in regional areas, better connecting people to experts. And there's also just a huge range of government programs and policies. Austrade run the Landing Pads initiative. There's 5 globally, and if I've got notes somewhere in here, I did say I was talking for 3 minutes and they did give me 10 pages of notes. So I've got kind of background on a whole lot of things, but I think also RDTI, which Katrina mentioned, the research and development tax incentives, are really, really excellent one. There's also tax incentives for crowdsourced equity funding, for early stage venture capital. There's a whole lot of stuff that the government does that we can help you with. And I think one of the best things about the Entrepreneurs Program is that you get access to a person who can essentially be your concierge into government. I mean, I work there and I know it can be really difficult to navigate. So having someone help you work your way through, that's really the best thing that we can offer for you.
Well, and that's really important. I mean, one of the things that we often hear from startups is they just don't know who to turn to or who to help them navigate what's available.
Yeah.
We were in London and a bunch of companies in the audience didn't even know about the R&D tax credit that's offered there. And so, I mean, having that person, that concierge inside of government is really useful.
Yeah.
So, Topaz, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the commercialization process then.
Okay, so I'm Topaz Conway. I'm a commercialization advisor to that program. I wear a number of different hats. I also am part of an accelerator called SBE Australia, or Springboard Enterprises, which is for women-led companies. So the so both of those things, the reason I mention the Springboard Accelerator is because the Accelerating Commercialization Program is in some ways like an accelerator program in that it is competitive. You have to apply, and the process itself is somewhat onerous, some people think, but it also really forces you to step outside your business and look into it versus, most entrepreneurs are so wrapped up in running their business, they don't take time to strategically step back and have a good look at it. So as an advisor, I'm externally contracted. My background is I've had a couple of companies myself in the US, I've had exits, I've been a VC, I'm an investor, I've run other people's companies. So I've got this very mixed background and US, Australia background. And so my value add into this process is really my experience and my connections. So I work with the applicant through that process to really help ascertain the competitiveness of the company and the plan. And if we both agree it's worth it, then we go for it. And then if that company is successful, the reason this program is so powerful is you actually get one of me for the course of the grant. So I've got 22 colleagues across Australia who do the same thing. And, we're like free advice, unsolicited or otherwise. But that is a huge value add because having been an entrepreneur myself in an environment in the US where the generosity of knowledge and assistance and help and support were freely given and the thing that the difference between me being successful as an entrepreneur and me not is something we're still working on in Australia. So what you get with this program is that missing cultural piece within the ecosystem, which the reason I do it, I don't do it because of the great money. I do it because it is an opportunity for me to help be a part of building a culture that, for me, as an entrepreneur in a different place, made the difference. So that's really a bit of a high-level view of what the program is about.
I think increasingly my hope is that you can find those communities of generosity around the world, and particularly in a place like this. I mean, the reason why we're doing this here today is because I met Alex at an event in London like 4 years ago, and we got to talking and kept in touch and knew that he was out here, and so he was generous to open up his space here. And so, hopefully we can continue to cultivate that across borders as well. I wanted to drill down on one particular issue for a first question, and for all of these questions, not everyone has to answer. There's 5 of you. You can take turns if you like. One issue that I think can be confusing as companies go global is understanding and complying with regulations. And so and we've also heard from some entrepreneurs that maybe that sort of thing is inconsistent with the lean startup model, right? I mean, we're too small or we're too early stage, no one's paying attention to us, why do we need to comply with regulations abroad? And so, kind of as a baseline question, is it important to comply with regulations abroad? And I think I know the answer, at least from the government officials. But then are there kind of simple, low-cost steps that you could recommend for companies that don't have a lot of resources to make sure that they're maximizing their chances of compliance with regulations abroad?
I'll start then. Yes, it's important to comply with regulations. Definitely, if you want to keep working in that market. So that kind of belies the point around using global platform. The answer is there. So when you choose a global platform, you're choosing a company and a software package that has actually been built fit for purpose to be rolled out in the market. So you can assume that the company that you're using has done its due diligence, has built it around the regulatory environment, the compliance environment. So if I think about our business, every market that we operate in, we're 100% compliant. And it is an intrinsic value that we have in our business. Because what is fundamental to our brand and what we do every day is trust. And that's trust in terms of the transaction actually going through, trust that you'll get your money, but also trust that we're acting in a legitimate way. And that's part and parcel for any global platform like Intuit, Shopify, Magento, etc. So that is a quick start to get to operate in those markets. say something?
Yeah, there's kind of multiple sides to that because there's the compliance around money, which is a big deal, and there's the compliance just about selling into certain markets. And I come from a background, a mixed background, both high tech and biotech and medical devices. And anybody who knows anything about the med tech space and even digital health knows that it's a highly regulated space. So even if you're working on a tech platform or a digital tech platform that's selling into the health sector, you have to know what every geography says about that, what kind of regulations are put on top of that, what kind of compliance you have to do, what kind of paperwork you have to provide, what kind of agencies you have to work with. And I can't tell you how many companies that I work with come and say, oh yeah, we're going to launch into the US tomorrow. And I say, well, what does the FDA have to say about that? And it's, oh, who's that? I haven't talked to them yet. So, just do your homework. No matter what you're doing, when you start to think about stepping outside of Australia, Google it. If nothing else, go to Google and ask, what do I have to do to launch, this kind of thing into this market? But the other thing is there are agencies within each of the countries. I mean, the U.S. has an amazing government trade office that we have access to here that you should be knocking on their door and saying, can you help me? And it's free. So, utilize the agencies that are out there, especially government agencies. And you'd know about the U.S. Trade Office. So, yeah, they're out there.
I think the other thing I'd add just very quickly is how different it is between, say, an early stage startup and a large organisation, and how, again, as Topaz mentioned, how different it is between heavily regulated industries and e-commerce, for example, right, or apps, whatever the case may be. Chalk and cheese. So financial services, just like the medical industry, massively regulated. So some of the things that we tried to do here, for example, to try and reduce the barriers to entry for early stage ventures is we worked with Treasury, the Treasurer and ASIC, for example, to create what's called a regulatory sandbox, where early stage ventures that fit within certain criteria can now launch and test their propositions in the market to a limited number of users, and in the case of certain products, certain amounts of assets under management or certain amounts of insurance policies, for example, before they have to go through the licensing process, right? And that's specifically designed to reduce the bureaucracy, to reduce all the compliance, checks and documentation before they're able to get to a point where they have an element of validation around what their proposition actually is, that then requires licensing and regulation and compliance, right? And that's something that is individual and I guess to an extent unique to each particular market. And the other thing I'd say quite cheekily is on the other side of the spectrum, look at what Uber does, right? It didn't wait for complying to the taxi code. It just came in and said, screw it, right? We're coming in and we're going to use consumer power to put pressure on politicians and governments to the point where if we can really grow a really strong and large user base, they can't get rid of us. And what happened overnight? State governments started to topple and they just went, yep, you know what, we're just going to legalise Uber. And all of a sudden the taxi industry went from, hang on, you can't do that, that's illegal, to, the world's changed. And it's quite interesting on a similar but completely different example. If you look at India, probably about 6 years ago, you had this really massive proliferation of mobile networks coming across the Indian continent, where the government and the regulator was giving out mobile licenses to all these large industrials like Reliance, for example, and huge other organisations. Now, a few years later, they realised because of the massive unbanked population, there was an opportunity to do mobile payments through phone to phone, right, through mobile operators. So they launched mobile payments. Now, they didn't have a financial services or banking license. So what happened is the banks got together and said, hey, regulator, you can't do this. These guys don't have a financial services license. They're not a licensed bank. So what did the regulator do? Gave them a license, right? So, yes, regulation is of vital importance. Yes, it's important to understand all these things. But at the same time, look at what's happening around the world, right? Governments and regulation are changing in response to the changing nature of technology. And they're changes that are heavily driven by, if it's in the best interests of the consumer, then the chances are regulation will change. So as much as it's important to be mindful and comply with regulation, don't let regulation stop your vision in terms of creating a better outcome for the consumer.
I'd probably just add one final point just to build on the comments that everyone on the panel has shared. The way I think about it is ask for help. You know, if this is the first time that you've done this, it's okay to ask for help. So surround yourself with, you've got some great government initiatives and partnerships available to you and great resources, whether it be grants, whatever, to help you grow. But I think as you go into those uncharted territories, partner with trusted advisors, whether they be legal advisors, whether they be accountants, whatever it might be, because, if you think about it, you haven't done this before. Generally, you haven't done this before. So if you're launching into a market where you don't know the tax legislation, you don't know, just the operating environment that you're entering into, partner with someone who can actually help you. And particularly using technology tools that are also going to help take those, the time and the effort out of you doing those manual calculations. I was slightly horrified to hear that you had someone running a business from a spreadsheet of that size, I think more than one. But I mean, that's an example. You want to grab tools that are going to take that compliance and automation and make it easier for you without you needing to go and manually calculate a BAS for Australia, or whether that be working out what's the tax legislation in Singapore or London, whatever the case may be. So for me, find local advisors or advisors that have done this before or who are set up for success to help you grow and scale, because that's ultimately going to be one of your part of your team around you, your extended team around you, to get that advice early. Because I think if you leave that advice too late and you think that advice is too expensive to get up front, I think what you'll find is it'll become a much more costly mistake that you would have made down the track versus getting the right advice up front.
Well, just to add to that, I think one of the points that we make in the report is that there are these different groups of advisors. There's peer advisors, and you could surround yourself with people like that were on the panel before who have been there before and can advise you on how they did things. You can surround yourself with professional advisors, and I think increasingly you have law firms and tax advisory firms that are being set up that are not the white glove law firm model that requires a very large retainer in order to engage. You've got these lawyers that are looking to engage startups in the hopes that some of them become bigger and then become that big contract, but are willing to do it for a smaller upfront fee. And then also large corporations as well. I mean, we've talked to a number of entrepreneurs who say that they never really thought to ask, their partners for help, whether it's Intuit or PayPal or Google or UPS or FedEx. But all of these large suppliers and fulfillment partners have small business teams, and they're almost always willing to reach out and provide advice, particularly if it's going to get your business to use their product more. And so I think they've been really valuable sources of advice and resources for some of the startups that we've talked to. I wanted to build on the point that Topaz was making about asking for advice from government officials. Could you talk a little bit more about or call out some government resources that we haven't talked about before? I mean, you had talked about the American presence here. The Australians have AusIndustry and Austrade in the United States and places around the world. Could you highlight some more of those resources?
Well, Jennifer might be better placed to do that, because I'm a little bit singular in focus with that. But the we do have the whole landing pad ecosystem that has been built out with landing pads across the globe, which provide a 6-month home for anybody wanting to go and explore a market or enter into a market. So those are out there. There's Austrade, and Jennifer, this is where you're going to save me.
All right, I even have a list. So there is, Austrade and AusIndustry really are the biggest ones, and we are working better to work closely together. We also fund growth centres in particular industries, and they're a really good resource if you happen to be in that industry. So the Austrade's got a variety of things. Landing pads one, the export market development grants another. There's also the minister mentioned the CSIRO Innovation Fund. Sorry, someone's got a hand up the back. Excellent.
Can someone give her a microphone?
In terms of government support, on top of obviously we work with the growth centres, AusIndustry, the New South Wales state government here, there's a powerful network called TradeStart. TradeStart works one-on-one with small businesses to help them to develop their market entry strategy for new markets. You've got EFIC, which is the finance organisation that provides small business loans. So the network or the ecosystem is actually quite strong in Australia, but it sometimes can be quite hard to navigate at what point do you touch the various organisations and where do they hand over. And that's something that at the Export Council we can actually help small businesses to navigate. And I do think that industry and Austrade are working a lot closer together to actually help facilitate that now.
The other thing we do that I haven't mentioned yet as part of the Entrepreneurs Program is we have a supply chain facilitation service. So what we do is work with large buyers and help improve the quality of the businesses in their supply chain. So we've got Volvo and Woolworths and a whole bunch of others whose names aren't coming to me right now. But that's not just about improving the businesses in their supply chain, it's also positioning those businesses to help go global. So if you're working with businesses that are global, that have top quality Australian suppliers, that can help link into their global supply chains as well.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
Hi, I'm Brendan Elliott. I'm from Jobs for New South Wales. So on top of all these wonderful federal government initiatives, we've also got state government support. So Jobs for New South Wales is actually sponsoring Spark Festival. We're going to be Alex's new landlord at the Sydney Startup Hub. And then on top of that, there's also grants for early stage startups and loans for fast growing SMEs, particularly ones looking to expand overseas. So I think the major takeaway for everyone today is there's a lot out there. There's a lot of support available. Come find it.
I just want to throw this out. This has been something that's been swirling around in my head for like 4 years now. Is I wish somebody'd build a platform so you can self-navigate through all of these things that are available both state and federally. And you know, I'd pay somebody to do that if somebody would just own it and do it. Because I've been talking about this literally for 4 years. And you know, it really does. This whole ability to self-triage is difficult to self-triage yourself through all of that. But you know, depending on where you are as a business, there is help available at every one of those stages. I think one of the challenges that I see in my everyday work and talking, you know, I talk to very early stage all the way up through very mature companies. And the challenge is really, what do you call yourself at what phase of your life in order to go and look for the right kinds of things that are available for you. Like the grant program that I consult into, you know, you can get up to $1 million in matching funds. So, you know, does that mean if you're an early stage company, is that for you? Or, you know, there are criteria around that. So the criteria being, you know, you have to not be in the market yet, but about to. So standing on the edge of the cliff and about ready to make first sale, that's the right time to go for that kind of grant. And it's matching dollars. So there's, you know, there's a lot of things that you need to know about the things that are out there. But I really do want somebody to build a platform for that.
You know, we really...
I'm going to trademark that one.
Sorry, I just thought I should also introduce myself. I'm Vivian Lim from Austrade. Sorry, guys. About the landing pads, we have 5 landing pads as part of the National Innovation and Science Agenda, and they're located in Singapore, in San Francisco, in Shanghai, Tel Aviv, and Berlin. And it allows startups up to 90 days residency. What you get at the landing pads really is a landing pads manager that connects you into the ecosystem within that country. You also have access to Austrade's networks. So it is a very worthwhile program for startups. It's actually a very successful program. with over, all the participants who have been surveyed gave it 100% satisfaction. So it's a very successful program. We also have connections into a lot of the multinationals, organizations that we work with internationally. So if you're looking for access into those networks, our colleagues have that network. The other thing that I will also articulate is the Export Market Development Grant. It is actually a grant that is open to Australian businesses with an ABN, with a desire to go global, and it reimburses up to 50% of your marketing funds. So if you are going into a market to pitch, that's doing your marketing. So you might want to consider that grant, and information can all be found on our website. One last thing about regulation, it is actually important. In certain sectors, it's more important because of like medical and food. Now, while there's so many organizations out there, for example, the National Measurements Institute, et cetera, it's very difficult to navigate. But at Austrade, we work very closely with other governments, other government departments, and so we can actually direct you, if you really needed that assistance, to the right area to get the advice around regulation and testing, because we are, within our teams, divided into sectors. So we have sector expertise for going global. So I'm going to be around here, so if you want to have more information about our programs or the types of assistance that we can provide you for going global, I'll be happy to have chats with you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you said something because I didn't know where you were in the audience. I wanted to echo something that Topaz had said before, is the value of embassies in the market that you're looking to get into. Whether it's the United States, which has a fantastic series of foreign commercial service officers at the embassy and consulates around Australia and around the world, or whether it's Chile or Colombia or Singapore, which have commercial service officers at many of their posts around the world. If you're looking to get into a particular market, go visit someone at the embassy here from that country. We actually used to do this all the time. We did this with the Australian government in Washington, D.C., as we were planning to come here, and they were fantastic. I mean, they set us up with, well, the two of you for one, but with a number of other government agencies and partners here in Melbourne and Canberra. And so they're really useful. I mean, some more than others, but Australia in particular. So, one more question for me, and then I was going to open it up to other questions. I wonder, so beyond these export and investment promotion programs that we've been talking about, what is the role, do you think, for, what should the role be for the Australian government in helping to unlock markets around the world? I mean, if you're a small business looking to sell to Argentina, you're only you can't sell there if tariffs or other government regulations prevent you from doing so, or prevent you from accessing technologies like PayPal and Intuit that would allow you to sell into those markets. So what would you suggest the role for the Australian government to be?
Don't build a wall. There's one.
Look, so I suppose my personal philosophy, as well as PayPal's philosophy, is around free trade and access to markets. It's a fundamental belief. We believe that by enabling that, you're actually enabling communities and individuals to thrive. And we see that every single day. So when I talk about Australian small business, I talk about it in the context of the renaissance of Australian small business. And there's no time like today to be an Australian small business owner that is producing unique goods that you can ship around the world freely and easily. So as an example of, government acting on regulation, last year, it actually went a little bit unknown, but the Chinese government sought to introduce a tax on imports into China for e-commerce transactions of a range of 10 to 15%. And then a couple of weeks later, they retracted that policy. And, it wasn't magic that made them retract the policy. It was, the intervention of the people like we see in this room, the people on the panel talking to regulators, talking to policymakers to make sure that there is free access to markets, which is a fundamental proposition around growing the economy.
I think I think that hits on a really important point, and that is, Australia has for generations operated as an island and quite nicely, and built reasonable businesses, especially around resources. That was our global thing. We no longer live in an isolated world. There is no such thing as a nationally focused economy. We are a global economy, like it or not, and we're going kicking and screaming. The government is going kicking and screaming into that realm. And we still have a long way to go to really understand how do you make intelligent policy around being a global player in a market where there's, everybody else is suffering from the same evolutionary dilemma that we are. So I think it's a really interesting time for the government. I think it's going to be a time where there's going to be a lot of mistakes made, a lot of playing catch up, a lot of trying things on that will work or won't work. But I think part of it is just shifting the mind. The government really needs to get on board quicker about doing their homework and really understanding what it means to be part of a global scene and a global economy.
I think I'll just add to that. The first thing I'd say is the immediate thing I think any government can do to either help small businesses, new early stage technology companies, or even then exporting, is to help them be as successful as possible in their home market. And this is something that any government has at its full control versus dealing with any foreign government and foreign market. And the kind of things I mean are as basic as how easy is it to set up a new business, right? We all know the new business index and how different markets and jurisdictions compare. And if it's an absolute pain in the neck to set up businesses here, then there's all these other bureaucratic requirements as you grow and so forth, then clearly you're providing an anchor on growth. And the longer it takes to grow to the point where you are now able to export, then the harder it is for that economy to advance in comparison to every other economy that it's competing with, right? So fundamentally, number one, my view is you fix your backyard and you make it as efficient, as effective, as frictionless as possible to maximise the chance of success, because that success, as Topaz said, even though you start local, you go global, but you can't go global until you've got something to go with, right? And then the second thing I'd say is the principle of reciprocity, which is back to the comment that was made around free trade. So many times when we had this much more of an isolationist mindset in terms of, well, we'll just stick within our own backyards, I think we gave a lot of ground, right? And great example with the e-commerce import tax, whereas, well, if you put that on, then maybe the rest of the world will put theirs on, and all of a sudden you've got a net loss, right? So having and being firm around those conversations, where in the past we're probably a lot more timid compared to some of our Northern American very, very close friends and allies, is great to see that we're starting to change that conversation. And the other thing I'd also say is, we always have conversations around the role of government. What can the government do? What should the government be doing? Frankly, the government is in response to what we tell them to do, right? It's a populist democracy. They're hungry to stay in government, and therefore they will respond to what the population and the electorate tells them they want, right? So for us to succeed, therefore the onus is on ourselves, not on the government. Right? We've got to stop thinking about what more can the government do, and rather keep telling ourselves and looking in the mirror and saying, what are the things that I think we need to succeed in that I need to communicate to the government that are important, and therefore make sure that until those things take place, I am relentlessly pursuing those things that I believe are important to our success. So it's important that whilst we have these dialogues around what can the government be doing, we are taking the responsibility and the accountability likewise to make sure that we're having those conversations, that we're pressing those key policy makers to make sure that the outcomes we believe to be required for success actually make it through to lawmakers, right? Otherwise, we're just a bunch of whingers, and no one wants to be that, right?
That's a really important point. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just say a couple of quick things. I think I get a bit nervous talking as the representative of the government, but sometimes government is not always just about doing things, it's about not doing things or about taking things away. So I think we've got to frame it sometimes in those terms as well. But the other thing is that I've just completely forgotten my second point. I'm going to hand over to you. And I'm sure it'll come back to me, and I'm sure it was brilliant.
I would just, echoing what Alex said, governments are increasingly interested in engaging with small businesses and startups to hear their voice. I think historically there was this inclination to talk to large corporations to figure out what they should do about policy, both domestic and foreign. And increasingly you see, I think here, and also certainly in the United States, an interest in sitting around the table with the smaller business voices. I guess the other thing that I would say is that Australian leadership in these international forums and with other countries around the world is increasingly important these days. As in the United States, we are doing a lot of re-examination of our trading relationships and where we sit in the world, and particularly our governments. And so I think businesses around the world are increasingly relying on strong voices of leadership for open markets, including in Australia and other places around the world. I'll tell you what I really think later. Okay, well, I wanted to open it up to other comments and questions.
Thank you. Hey guys, really good conversation. So I'm building a startup which is backed by Coca-Cola, and it looks like we're about to see the CSIRO Kickstart grant, which is all fantastic. I've got a question around the mobility of workforce. So what drives a startup is its people. This year it took 4 months to get a 457 approved. It almost killed my business. I was within about 4 weeks of it failing, and we pulling the plug, going to another country to do it. In 2009, it was taking 4 weeks for the same visa. So I've got a real concern about my workforce, and I'm now looking at places like Chile, like Estonia, not so much the States anymore, but I'm looking at where I can get blockchain experts and talent that I need, because it's the few and far between, quickly and cheaply, and in a really mobile, innovative government. So we talk about innovation in Australia, but from this angle, New Zealand are doing far more. They've got the Edmund Hillary Foundation and things like that. So yeah, I just thought I'd get your thoughts on that and where you see the opportunities and the challenges in that space.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a crack at that. You are absolutely right. And it's gotten even harder recently with the changes to that 457 visa. It's something that all of us across the startup industry in particular, and I'm sure in loads of other even larger organisations that require the need to import talent that potentially is hard to access here in Australia. As a country and as policymakers, we've got to get our heads around this and really understand the fact that the way to win this game is by attracting the world's best talent to Australia, right? Value creation, companies, startups, whatever label we put on this thing called an enterprise is powered by people, right? And people create the technology, right? It's people that are creating the value. It's people that are creating the jobs, right? So if we don't have the world's best people here, then those best technologies, innovation and wealth creation is going to happen somewhere else. And not only that, but if we don't create this influx of people, you'll see what happens like in the areas around Silicon Valley, for example. They themselves aren't getting developers from Silicon Valley because they're too expensive and they hop from startup to startup every 6 months, right? So it's hugely important for us to have this influx of great talent because as one person told me about 3 months ago, which was absolutely spot on, Australia is a lifestyle superpower, right? We've got that incredible tick that hardly any developed country has in the world, plus all these great opportunity around technology and innovation. And that is fundamental to startup success, and it's fundamental to retaining great talent at any stage and size of business. So I can't agree with you anymore. What I can say is that FinTech Australia, together with Startup Oz and various other organisations, have clubbed together and worked with the Immigration Department and Immigration Ministry to actually change and update the jobs that fit the criteria for 457 to try and make that situation a lot less likely to occur in the future.
Yep. I just want to reiterate and support what Alex said. One of the other hats I wear is I chair Startup Oz, and that is something that we have. We're in our second year of really working very, very, very hard to see about getting that policy right. So it is something that we're aware of as a community, and there are, working together with some of the big voices that we can to Canberra to help get that change. Another one of those other barriers also is the cost of doing business in the first place, and so there are things. Yes, I agree. We as entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneurial economy, we just have to go and do it in spite of the government, and not wait for the government to catch up. We have to continually, though, be out there speaking about what we need. To just go out there and do the job and then complain, or whinge about it is not going to get the job done. But the collective voice and the collective power of the businesses that you're building, you have a voice. Money equals voice. So the more we build successful companies that are worth more, that are bringing more money into the country, the bigger our voice will become to change those things that will make it easier for us to do business. So I just say, use your voice, use your mouth.
I'll just add a really quick build. I don't think startups are alone in trying to find great talent, whether it be outside of Australia, whether it be local. Head of customer care, I still find challenges at times to look for great talent. So I think what you've got to do, you've got to be innovative in terms of how are you looking for talent, like what Alex was saying, like trying to find local talent rather than trying to look offshore. But there's great platforms which I'm sure you use in a number of you across, like Freelancer. Using platforms like Freelancer to help you outsource and crowdsource some of that work to help you get through those initial sort of challenges. But really, I'd be looking at what's the culture that you're trying to create as part of your startup to see, are there friends, are there, local networks that you can sort of tap into as well to help you grow? And assuming that you've already sort of explored all those options, you've obviously got some great resources that they're obviously changing and helping to grow. But I think we've all got to innovate and just think of the jobs that we do today aren't the jobs that we did 5 years ago. And the people who want those jobs want different things. So we've all got to change the way in how we're looking to onboard new talent. And I struggle with that problem myself as head of customer care.
It's quite funny because the visa in question was me, so I would have looked for someone else, but I'd been out of a job.
So I think maybe we'll end with two more comments or questions. And so I want to recognize Phoebe from NASDAQ.
Thank you very much, Jake, and thank you, everyone. Is it okay to come from the front? Yep.
Sure.
Yeah. I think I'll face this way instead of everybody turning to me. And my name is Phoebe, and I'm from NASDAQ. And thank you very much, Jake, today to bring us such a wonderful event. And there's so many discussions today talking about the government assistance to the startups, to the innovation industry. And what I'd like to share with you as well is we as a corporate, as American Stock Exchange, we are also doing some work to help with the innovation and startup culture. So what we do is me personally is representing our entrepreneurial center, and we physically have our space in San Francisco. So we started about 2 years ago, and our entire aim is to, through education, to help entrepreneurs all around the globe to grow, to grow as a person, to run successful business. And the main offering we do these days is a mentoring program, which is called Milestone Maker Program. And the beauty of this program is to connect founders in Australia with the success in the Silicon Valley from the US. So just like, on the panel, just then, first panel, we had Katrina from Flamingo talking about the challenges. They're developing business in the US. It's hard to procure clients from the corporate side. And this is exactly where we come into place. We have hundreds of mentors that can help startups in Australia to tap into the United States market, to give you that successful experience. So I guess just want to share with you guys today. And I guess there are 2 ways you can participate. If you are a founder, I will be very much welcome you to join with our next term Milestone Maker program in San Francisco. And if you are corporate who also have a spirit into innovation, entrepreneurship, then we are looking for partners in run our own Milestone Maker programs for Australia. Because if you imagine in San Francisco right now, every term we have only 15 candidates get into the program from the globe. So everybody from Australia, you'll be competing with everybody from the globe, right? And if we have Australia program, then we have much better chance to succeed into the program. So yeah, thank
you
you so
very
much
much,
for your
Phoebe.
time. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
And you get the final word.
Oh, thank you. Lynn Wood from Idea Spas. I'd really love to see 2 action items from this morning, apart from the wonderful information. The first one, I love Topaz's idea about a platform that brings all these possibilities together, because it's so time-consuming for a startup to try and search for this information, and even when you get it and you make an application, often the criteria aren't spelled out in advance, so it's very difficult. The second one is on the immigration possibilities for people to come to Australia. For example, the Idea Spies developer is in New York, and he'd love to come to Australia, but it's incredibly difficult. We're short of programmers. So I'd love to see, and it's great to hear that you're working on that. But my question is something else that we can do with. Because I'm sharing ideas on startups, I find that often they don't have a name that's a brand, and it doesn't translate through their website to their social media. And I'm wondering if other people are finding the same thing, because I would have thought it's 101 basic if you're a startup and you want to go global, that you've got a global brand name.
So, we deal with tens of thousands of businesses every single day. So one I'll call out is a company called High Smile. Anyone heard of High Smile? Anyone using it? Teeth whitening kit, a self teeth whitening kit. But these are guys in Brisbane who started up their business and, developed a product. They got it made in China. They're importing it down to Australia. But then they sourced an influencer, being Kylie Jenner, to actually make a post on Instagram and Facebook. And within, weeks, months, they've been injected with sales from all over the planet. So it's not so much about the brand, it's actually how you get your brand out there. And that's, I think, the change that's pretty evident.
Anyone else want to take? Someone's desperate.
Created with the government to create a one-stop shop portal for everything to do with both trade support but also trade facilitation. Unfortunately, what's happened is it's currently stuck with the Department of Immigration and Border Protection, and we're trying to influence how they continue to look at funding the development of this. So back to Alex's point, and also Topaz's, we really need to hear from you if you think this is a good idea, because unless business supports the initiative, it's basically going to just sit, unfortunately, with no solution. So if you really believe you want something like this, please can you just give me your card, because we need to build the business support for it to help influence the government spending.
So I can do that. I even have an outline of the platform, which I developed 4 years ago. And then the New South Wales government did a whole roundtable again last year, I think, had the same conversation, and everybody comes out getting all excited about it, and they try to build something, and it fails. And, because it should probably live with government, right? Because it needs continual upgrading, it needs continual support, financial support. So it's not really something that a company can take on. So yeah, I'll give you my card, be happy to talk.
So with that, that concludes our program. And so I really appreciate all of you spending time with us this morning. What we're going to do from the Global Innovation Forum side is develop takeaways. We'll put them on our website. We'll be back in touch to share them with you. I just want to ask if you could join me in thanking Stone and Chalk, Intuit, PayPal, Entrepreneurs Program,